Welcome to the deep dive. We've got an incredibly compelling mission for today's exploration.
We really do.
Yeah, we are zeroing in on a single, profoundly powerful primary source. It's from circa 1890.
Right at the height of the Gilded Age.
Exactly, and it's a black and white photograph taken by the Danish-American photographer and social reformer Jacob Riis.
And the title of this image is just simply Iscrubs.
Right. And if you've ever been fascinated by the birth of social documentary photography or just the untold stories of everyday resilience,
This will completely change how you view archival images.
totally. So for the listener, our focus today is really the girl who scrubbed. We're unpacking Jacob Riis' Iscrubs and how this one unsmiling 9-year-old girl helped to entirely shift the ethical landscape of photography.
And social reform in New York City.
Yeah. So to set the stage, we are dropping right into the late 19th century, like you said, circa 1890.
Which is just an era of intense, rapid industrialization.
Massive waves of immigration.
And absolutely crushing poverty in these urban centers.
Now, a lot of you listening might be familiar with Jacob Riis's really famous 1890 book, How the Other Half Lives.
Right. It's basically a landmark piece of social reform.
It is. But today, we're focusing on the sequel to that book, which was published in 1892.
The Children of the Poor.
Yes. Okay, let's unpack this. Because what was the driving force behind Riis writing a sequel so quickly?
Well, the driving force was really this realization that the first book, as groundbreaking as it was.
It painted with a very broad brush.
Exactly. With How the Other Half Lives, Riis was taking aim at general poverty.
The structural squalor.
The overcrowding, the disease.
Yeah.
But with The Children of the Poor, his focus just narrows dramatically.
He pivots to a very specific demographic.
Right, a group that was falling through the cracks of even the most well-intentioned reform efforts.
The children of the poorer classes.
And specifically, children who were already participating in the grueling labor force at just a startlingly young age.
Yeah. Riis isn't walking through the tenement districts observing kids, playing stickball in the street or causing mischief.
No, he's looking at working children.
And not just working a few hours a week for pocket money either.
We're talking about carrying the kind of physical and psychological burdens that would absolutely break most modern adults.
He saw a system that was just consuming its youngest and most vulnerable members.
And his purpose with this second book was to sound the alarm. He wanted to force the creation of better conditions for these kids.
So before we delve into the specifics of this one photograph, I want to ask you, the listener, to just pause for a second.
Try to place yourself in that 1890s mindset.
Yeah, think back to when you were 9 years old. Picture what your days looked like.
And now strip away the schoolyard.
The playtime.
The inherent freedom and safety of childhood.
Replace that with the full, unyielding weight of adult survival responsibilities.
Just imagine the physical toll of manual labor and the mental toll of extreme poverty, day in and day out.
Within the stifling walls of a tenement building.
That is the reality we are stepping into.
It's a staggering reality to try and map onto a child. And that brings us right to the subject of our deep dive today.
Let's meet little Katie.
The girl behind the lens. So the full formal title of this photograph gives us our first major clues about her life.
It's titled Iscrubs. Little Katie from the W52nd Street Industrial School.
That title is incredibly striking.
It is, because it immediately centers her voice.
Right, in an era where the poor were often treated as silent, nameless subjects.
Subjects to be studied or pitied. The title doesn't just describe her from an outsider's perspective.
It quotes her directly. Iscrubs.
It's an active, definitive statement of identity.
It really is. And we know some highly specific details about her living situation at the time this photo was taken.
Katie is 9 years old.
She lives on West 49th Street in New York City.
And she resides on the top floor of a tenement building.
And to understand the gravity of that, we really have to look at her family dynamics.
Which were complex and incredibly demanding.
Yeah, she lived with her father, her stepmother, an older sister, and 2 brothers.
And the defining characteristic of this household is that all of her siblings worked.
The older sister and both brothers were part of the labor force.
To fully grasp what that means, we have to visualize that top floor tenement.
Oh, those buildings were notoriously brutal environments.
They were narrow, typically 5 to 6 stories high.
With minimal ventilation.
Very little natural light.
Yeah.
And often no indoor plumbing beyond a single cold water tap in the hallway.
If that.
Right. Now, put a family of 6 or 7 people into a few tiny, cramped rooms in that environment.
The fact that all the older siblings are working tells us that the economic margins of this family are razor thin.
The combined wages of the father, The older sister and the two brothers are still barely enough to keep a roof over their heads.
And food on the table. Every single capable hand has to generate value.
Which brings us to Katie's specific value generation.
Captured right in that interaction with Riis. He meets her, he asks her what her work is, and her answer is that blunt, unadorned phrase.
Iscrubs.
But it's Riis's observation of her that really stands out to me.
He notes that her look guaranteed that what she scrubbed came out clean.
What's fascinating here is that Riis is looking at a 9-year-old child, but he's evaluating her with the metrics you'd use for a seasoned professional.
He doesn't see a helpless waif.
No, he sees a highly competent, serious worker.
He describes her in his writings as a sober, patient, sturdy little thing.
He recognizes a profound resilience in her demeanor.
She isn't doing a sloppy job just to get by. She takes her labor seriously because her survival and her family's functioning depends on it.
And the setting where he meets her adds another layer to this.
He encounters her at the West 52nd Street Industrial School.
These industrial schools were established specifically for poor children,
Often run by charitable organizations.
So Katie is existing at this intense intersection.
She's attending this school, presumably attempting to get some rudimentary education.
Or vocational training.
Maybe getting a hot meal.
Yeah.
But her core identity,
The way she introduces herself to a stranger.
exactly, is defined entirely by her manual labor.
It highlights a tragic dichotomy.
The school represents a desperate grasp at childhood, a place for learning.
But the reality of her life outside those walls overrides it.
She isn't Katie the student.
She is Katie who scrubs.
I really want to dwell on the sheer physical toll of that existence.
We're talking about a 9-year-old girl.
Her day consists of scrubbing floors,
Getting down on her hands and knees with harsh lye soap.
hauling heavy wooden buckets of dirty water.
Wringing out rags until her hands are raw.
And then, at the end of that exhausting, bone-deep manual labor,
She has to walk back to West 49th Street.
and physically climb the dark, narrow stairs all the way to the top floor of her tenement.
The physical exhaustion alone is difficult to comprehend for a child whose bones are still growing.
But Riis captures something even darker,
He writes about the psychological weight.
describing that dull life wearing on her day by day.
It's the sheer grinding monotony of it all.
There is no weekend to look forward to,
No summer vacation.
no upward mobility. It is a relentless, unending cycle of poverty and physical exertion.
A hard life that stretches out endlessly before her, slowly eroding the spark of youth.
This is a sobering thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
If you picture a 9-year-old in your life right now, a daughter, a niece, a neighbor,
And you superimpose Katie's daily routine onto them.
the contrast is jarring. Waking up in a suffocatingly crowded tenement room.
Heading out to scrub floors or attend a charity school.
Trudging home to climb 5 flights of stairs.
And carrying the sober, patient demeanor of a sturdy, hardened worker.
It strips away any romanticized notions of the past and exposes the incredibly harsh reality of 1890s poverty.
It certainly does. And what makes it even more devastating is understanding that Katie's situation was not an isolated incident.
She was not a unique tragedy that Riis happened to stumble upon.
No, she belonged to a broader, recognized demographic within the slums that Riis identified and categorized.
He referred to girls in Katie's specific situation as little mothers.
The little mothers.
It's a term that is simultaneously affectionate and deeply disturbing.
Riis used this phrase for the girls in his pictures because, despite their young age, they had inherited responsibilities that were entirely adult in nature.
We see exactly what those responsibilities looked like in Katie's life.
Her specific domestic burden, on top of everything else, was keeping house for her older sister and her 2 brothers.
Imagine the logistics of that. We've established that the older siblings are out working wage-earning jobs to pay the rent.
That leaves 9-year-old Katie living on the top floor as the primary caretaker of the domestic space.
Keeping house in an 1890s tenement meant hauling fresh water up 5 flights of stairs for drinking and cooking.
It meant hauling the wastewater back down,
It meant managing the coal stove,
preparing whatever meager meals they could afford.
mending clothes, and keeping the suffocating soot and grime of the city at bay.
She is responsible for the domestic survival of 3 older working siblings.
And Riis has this incredibly poignant, almost poetic quote summarizing her situation.
He says, very early, the cross of her sex had been laid upon the little shoulders that bore it so stoutly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that phrase, the cross of her sex, is essential to understanding the social dynamics of the era.
What does that mean in the context of the 1890s slums?
It implies that on top of the crushing, indiscriminate burdens of extreme poverty,
Female children faced an entirely separate gendered burden.
the boys in the family were forced into wage labor, which is horrific in its own right.
But the female children, the little mothers, were saddled with domestic management,
They were expected to be the glue holding the household together.
performing invisible, unpaid labor that was essential for the wage earners to function.
It creates this intense duality in her existence.
She is a child, yet she is functioning as the de facto matriarch of a working household.
The poverty forces everyone in the family to sacrifice their comfort.
But the gender dynamics of the 19th century dictate exactly how that sacrifice is extracted.
The boys sell their labor to the factories or the streets.
The girls sacrifice their childhood to the maintenance of the home.
And they bore it, as Riis noted, stoutly.
There was no room for complaint.
No alternative safety net to catch them if they failed.
The survival of the family unit depended on a 9-year-old girl successfully managing the exhausting logistics of a tenement household.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When you realize that because she wasn't an anomaly,
Because there were thousands of little mothers throughout the Lower East Side and Hell's Kitchen carrying this specific burden,
Riis had to figure out how to accurately capture the reality.
and recognizing the quiet dignity, that sturdy, sober reality of these girls, seems to have forced a massive shift in Riis's own professional methodology.
It was a monumental shift. And to understand the evolution of Riis as a reformer, we have to look closely at the ethics of the lens.
There is a stark, documented contrast between how Riis operated when he published How the Other Half Lives in 1890.
Versus how he operated just 2 years later with The Children of the Poor.
Let's break down that contrast. In his earlier work, his methods were famously aggressive.
He photographed people, very often, entirely without their permission.
That is putting it mildly. Riis's early methods were essentially photographic ambushes.
We have to remember the technology of the time.
Photography in the dark, cramped interiors of the tenements required artificial light.
This was the era of explosive magnesium flash powder.
Riis, often accompanied by police or health inspectors, would literally burst into a tenement room or a cellar dive in the middle of the night.
He'd set up his bulky camera equipment in the pitch black.
Ignite this flash powder, which created a blinding explosion of light
A loud bang.
and a cloud of acrid smoke,
He'd capture the terrified, disoriented reactions of the sleeping inhabitants.
and then flee before they could fully realize what had happened.
It sounds like a home invasion.
He was using the camera as an offensive weapon to capture the raw, unfiltered squalor.
He wanted to shock middle-class society, and he used shock tactics on his subjects to get those images.
But for Iscrubs, and for the portraits in this second book, he abandons that tactic completely.
He takes the absolute opposite approach.
He started getting to know the children and asking them for permission prior to taking the photograph.
This raises an important question about the history of social documentary photography and really the history of journalistic ethics.
Why change tactics? Why abandon the explosive ambush for the quiet, negotiated portrait?
If we look at what he is trying to capture, the dullness and harshness of a child's life,
That slow, grinding attrition of the spirit.
you cannot capture that with a surprise explosion in the middle of the night.
A flash powder ambush captures acute terror and confusion.
But to capture the profound, chronic exhaustion of a little mother, you need her to sit still.
You need to look her in the eye. You need a baseline level of trust and interaction.
You can't capture a sober, patient demeanor if you are startling someone out of their sleep.
You have to ask. And we know exactly how Katie reacted when he asked.
Riis states that when she was asked to take the photograph at the school, she accepted it, without questioning or smiling.
The absence of a smile in this photograph is the absolute critical element.
It is the defining feature of the portrait.
It demonstrates her maturity far more effectively than her physical stature.
She looks incredibly mature for her age, and her indifferent look is the visual manifestation of the dullness and harshness of her life.
If you picture the scene, it is incredibly powerful.
You have Jacob Riis, a Danish-American reformer, setting up this large, cumbersome 1890s camera on a wooden tripod.
He's ducking under a dark cloth to focus the lens.
And he asks this 9-year-old girl, who has spent her morning scrubbing floors, for permission to take her picture.
She doesn't ask him why he wants it. She doesn't primp or try to perform for the camera.
She just stands there and gives him that indifferent, deadly, serious look.
It is a level of unvarnished, brutal truth that you almost never see in portraiture from that era.
It is a foundational moment. Think about modern photojournalism.
Think about the intense, ongoing debates we have today regarding the ethics of photographing vulnerable subjects.
The concept of informed consent.
The power dynamic between the person behind the lens and the person in front of it.
We can trace the roots of those complex ethical debates right back to this quiet interaction in 1890.
When does a subject transition from being a mere prop used to illustrate poverty to being an active, consenting participant in their own historical documentation?
Katie, by accepting the photograph without questioning or smiling, claims her space in that process.
She refuses to perform. She simply exists in her reality.
That refusal to perform is what gives the image its immense power.
And it ties directly into what Riis was actually trying to achieve.
Let's talk about the mission of muckraking journalism.
Riis's ultimate goal for the children of the poor was explicit:
He wanted to alert people to the crisis.
to force the creation of better conditions for the children of the poorer classes.
To understand how he planned to do that, we need to define the fields he was operating in.
Riis's work is categorized as muckraking journalism and social documentary photography.
It is crucial to understand that these were not artistic endeavors meant for quiet contemplation in a gallery.
These were targeted, aggressive campaigns for social change,
Muckraking was about digging up the dirt.
exposing the corruption, the institutional failures, and the hidden suffering of society.
And throwing it directly into the faces of the comfortable classes.
This single black and white photograph of Katie wasn't taken to be admired for its composition or its lighting.
It was a tool. It was a lever designed to exert political and social pressure.
Riis was using Katie's image and the stark reality of her story to shock the conscience of the public and the policymakers.
And he did it by being hyper-specific.
In his writings, he didn't just talk about the slums as some vague, abstract concept.
He listed specific addresses. He noted that Kitty lived on West 49th Street and went to school on West 52nd Street.
He is grounding the issue geographically.
For a wealthy New Yorker reading his book in their comfortable uptown brownstone in 1892, this was a revelation.
The suffering wasn't happening in some distant quarantine zone.
It was happening right down the street.
It forced the reader to confront the immediate physical proximity of this extreme poverty.
So what does this all mean? If the goal is to generate public outrage and demand sweeping legislative reform for child welfare, why use this specific image?
If you are a muckraker trying to pull at the heartstrings of Victorian society, you might assume that a photo of a child openly weeping or looking visibly terrified and frail would be the most effective propaganda.
But Riis chose Katie. He chose the indifferent look.
Because the tragic normalization of her suffering is a far more devastating indictment of society than a moment of panic.
A crying child is a child reacting to an acute, immediate crisis.
But a child who is sober, patient, sturdy, a child who accepts a stranger's camera without a single trace of a smile.
Hoop casually states Iscrubs as her entire identity.
That is a child whose entire existence has been subsumed by structural hardship.
It shows that the system hasn't just hurt her, it has fundamentally altered her nature.
Precisely. The dullness of her life wearing on her day by day is the true muckraking hook.
It communicates to the comfortable classes that the economic system they benefit from requires the systemic, daily crushing of a 9-year-old girl's spirit.
It shows that her childhood hasn't just been interrupted, it has been entirely stolen.
And that stolen childhood is a much harder reality for society to ignore or excuse.
It is a brilliant, if heartbreaking, editorial choice.
And that powerful, unvarnished message has resonated far beyond the pages of an 1892 reform book.
Let's look at the institutional legacy of Iscrubs.
The journey of this specific photograph over the last century is a fascinating study in how we value historical documentation.
Today, original prints of this photograph are held in some of the most prestigious cultural institutions in the world.
They are housed at the Museum of the City of New York.
The Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York.
And at the International Center of Photography, also in New York.
MoMA, the International Center of Photography. These are the absolute pinnacles of institutional prestige and fine art.
And it wasn't just this one photo. Riis was incredibly prolific, and many of his works from this era share this hallowed status.
Think about images like Bandit's Roost from 1888, which shows the menacing, shadowy alleyways of Mulberry Bend.
Or Lodgers in Bayard Street Tenement from 1889, showing a room packed floor to ceiling with sleeping men.
He captured Sabbath Eve in a coal cellar.
The Street Arabs showing homeless children sleeping over subway grates.
And The Trench in Potter's Field around 1890. He extensively documented the absolute bottom of the social ladder.
What does it mean for a photograph like Iscrubs, an image originally intended as a desperate utilitarian plea for immediate child welfare reform, printed on the cheap paper of a political pamphlet, to now be preserved under climate-controlled glass in fine art institutions?
It is a profound transition.
It has evolved from a disposable muckraking tool meant to alert the public in 1892 into being celebrated as a masterpiece of 1890s black and white photography.
It speaks to the enduring, transcendent power of the image itself.
The artistic merit of the composition.
The stark, unforgiving lighting.
The raw, undeniable honesty of Katie's gaze.
These visual elements are so powerful that they transcend the original, immediate political purpose.
Even though the specific tenements are long gone, the artistic power of the image continues to command our attention, forcing us to remember that history.
I am just marveling at the trajectory of little Katie. Think about it.
This 9-year-old girl who just wanted to keep her top-floor tenement clean for her siblings,
Who hauled dirty water up 5 flights of stairs,
who just wanted to get through the exhausting day.
is now immortalized alongside the greatest masterworks of human history.
Her quiet, unsmiling endurance is preserved forever in the halls of MoMA.
It is the ultimate testament to the power of documentation.
By acknowledging someone's daily reality, by truly stopping to see them, as Jacob Riis stopped to see Katie,
Asking for her consent rather than ambushing her.
you can create ripples through history that outlast everyone involved.
Her individual hardship was translated into a universal symbol of endurance.
Let's briefly recap the incredible journey we have taken on this deep dive.
We started on the grueling top floor of a tenement on West 49th Street.
Trying to comprehend the heavy gendered burden placed on the shoulders of the little mothers.
We watched as Jacob Riis, confronted with Katie's quiet dignity, evolved his methods.
Moving away from the violence of ambush photography to seeking quiet consent.
Forever altering the ethics of the lens.
And finally, we followed that resulting, unvarnished image all the way to the hallowed halls of the Museum of Modern Art.
It is a profound reminder of how acknowledging a harsh, everyday reality can echo through the centuries.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week.
We established that when Katie was approached with the camera, she accepted it, without questioning or smiling.
Today, we live in a highly mediated world where we are constantly conditioned to smile for the camera.
We are trained from infancy to present an idealized, cheerful, frictionless version of ourselves, the exact moment a lens is pointed in our direction.
We perform for the historical record of our own lives.
But Katie gave Jacob Riis, and by extension, the entirety of history, the radical, unvarnished truth of her existence.
As you capture your own moments this week, whether on a smartphone or a digital camera, think about what nuanced realities are lost when we instinctively force a smile for the sake of presentation.
And consider what profound historical truth might be gained when we simply allow a photograph to capture the unvarnished reality of exactly who we are and what we are carrying in that given moment.